Oh, great. It's very quick. You changed the logo with the new one.
Yeah.
Really
So you could see the PowerPoint, correct?
Yes, yes, it's correct.
Good morning, Eva.
Good morning.
I just sent Eva the new logo, Bu Novia, and she did that very quickly. Really appreciate it.
Of course, no problem.
Ibu Novia will be our moderator for this afternoon sessions, and we will have Professor Sukenda. He been joined since the morning session, and also we will have Ibu Deborah or Ibu Diana from DG Aquaculture as one of the discussion.
Perfect. I look forward to diving in and presenting today. Just just give me a heads up whenever you're ready for me to get started.
Sure. Our colleague from Vienna, probably Stefan, and also Nima will join as well during your session.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm. So for Herman, he will join tomorrow, right? For the tomorrow session?
Yes, he might quickly listen in today. But today his schedule is a little bit less certain, and tomorrow he will join and give some opening remarks as well.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much, Eva,
No
for organizing that.
So Eva, as discussed, we are going. We will have 2 sessions, and then your first presentation will be about 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. Then continue with Prof. Sukenda and Ibu Deborah or Ibu Diana will discuss it, and then after that, about 20 minutes, we continue with the second session. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
That's perfect. Thank you. The second session for me will be a little bit shorter, but I think for the first one I'll need that.
Oh, okay.
40 minutes. Just a quick check. You can still see the slides only. It's not showing it to me anymore.
Oh yeah, we could see clearly.
Okay, perfect.
Mbak Ita kita panggil-panggil kayaknya ya.
Iya, Bu. Kita cek di WhatsApp. Pak Kenda, apa sudah bergabung kembali?
Ya.
Sudah. Kenda sudah. Makasih Bapak. Mbak Debbie, Mbak Deborah, apa sudah bergabung? Ibu, ya silakan Mbak Deborah, sudah bergabung Kak?
Bu Deborah, mohon izin bahwa Bu Deborah sedang perjalanan pulang dari kantor ke rumahnya untuk bergabung kembali gitu.
Oh baik, terima kasih banyak Pak Setiawan. Baik.
Terima kasih.
Mudah-mudahan pas waktunya. Terima kasih Pak.
Mbak Ita, aku kayaknya belum lihat nama Steven ya. Sudah deh.
Steven belum ya.
Belum ya?
Belum Bu, ya Steven sama Nima belum ya.
Masih kebagian. Eva, sorry. What time is it now there?
It's 7:30 now.
7:30, okay.
Definitely not too bad. It's already light out, so.
Thank you.
Ibu Novia izin menyampaikan Pak Stefan tidak bisa hadir, Bu.
Oh, nggak bisa? Oke. Terus Bapak Nima datang nggak? Bisa hadir
Ini
atau?
belum ada respons Ibu di grup.
Berarti Pak Sudari yang akan menyambut?
Ditunggu.
Good morning, Eva.
Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you. How have you been?
Yeah. So what is time now in the Netherlands? 7:30?
7:30, yeah.
All right. Sorry to wake you up early, yeah?
Oh, no worries. I like resting early.
Yeah, right. So it's good luck, yeah? So just listening your presentation then, yeah?
Thank you.
Nima sudah ada. Good morning, Nima.
Good morning, good afternoon to Indonesia, good morning in Europe.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nima, yeah.
Morning. Ibu Deborah udah bergabung, Bu Novia.
Iya, mohon
Mbak Debbie.
pindah ke rumah, Mbak. Koneksinya di kantor kurang stabil. Makasih.
Oh, iya. Terima kasih, Mbak Debbie.
Okay.
Hi, Ibu Debbie. How are you?
Hi, Nima. I'm fine, thank you. Halo,
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you too. Hello, Eva. Nice to meet you.
Hi, good afternoon, Deborah. Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, good morning.
Okay. Kita bisa mulai.
Iya, Bu. Kayaknya udah hadir semua. Narsum
ya?
dan... Oh, iya.
Oke. Jadi yang akan menyambut nanti Nima atau Pak Sudari memberikan remarks.
Nima
Bu,
nanti yang kan. Ya.
Okay, so we can officially start.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eva van der Klom. I'm the technical manager at GSSI, and in that capacity, I coordinate all our benchmarking work. And before I get started today, I'd just like to quickly express my gratitude to IndoGAP, the DGA, and UNIDO for setting up this workshop, but also for inviting me to be part of it. I'm very happy to be here today and to present to you. And also to see the level of interest there is in the GSSI benchmark tool, which is much appreciated. So today I will give two presentations. First, in the next 30 to 40 minutes, I will share an introduction to GSSI and our global benchmark tool. I will pause for questions after this introduction. And at this stage, we'll also have a chance to hear from Professor Sukinda and the DGA. And then in the second part of my presentation, building on that general introduction, I'd like to present a bit more of an in-depth overview of the benchmark framework. And during this time, as much as possible, zoom into some examples of currently recognized GSSI schemes, and also on the results of the IndoGAP pilot and pre-assessments from 2015 and 2019. With that, I hope to really provide a good understanding of the content of our tool and what IndoGAP would be expected to align with when they would apply for a pre-assessment or benchmarking process. So for our agenda today, so for the first presentation, I'll cover the topics listed here. So start with an introduction to our organization, then dive into the work that we do that we're all here for today, which is the benchmark tool. And I will cover some details on the type of certification we benchmark, the framework we benchmark them against, and the processes we use to execute those benchmarking. So after the introduction on the tool, give a quick recap on the results of recognition. So which schemes are currently recognized and what added value does this provide them with? So let's get started. GSSI is a public-private partnership with a global network, meaning that we currently have partners in 24 countries, mainly Europe and the US, but also many partners in South America, Asia, and the Pacific. And our partnership consists of funding partners, so seafood businesses all across the seafood supply chain, and also affiliated partners, so your not-for-profit, but also governmental organizations. For instance, FAO plays a big role since we started our work in 2015, since we base a large part of our work on their documentation. And additionally, we are glad to have welcomed UNIDO to our affiliated partnership this year. And together have joint efforts to promote that sustainable production of seafood. So in addition to our partners, we currently have 9 GSSI recognized schemes, which are not formal partners, but they're definitely an important group for GSSI as they benefit from our joint efforts of our partnership, but they also deliver important contributions to the work that we are currently doing. So what is GSSI? As mentioned, it's a public-private partnership with a global reach, which means that we are bringing together different stakeholders in the industry. So commercial businesses, scheme owners, nonprofits, and international organizations. And with that, we're helping to gap the bridge between the public and private partnership, between the public and private sector. So our partnership is led mainly by the industry partners. And with our leadership, we work towards our mission of more sustainable seafood for everyone. And when we say more sustainable seafood, we mean both the quantity of sustainable seafood that's available, as well as increasingly sustainable seafood. So continuously raising the bar for sustainability. To achieve this mission of more sustainable seafood, GSSI is committed to building clarity, confidence, and choice in sustainable seafood. So providing clarity in the sustainability space where there can sometimes be confusion about good practices, but also inspiring confidence in the sustainability solutions that are already out there, such as seafood certification. Third element is choice, which allows to have regional applicability. So sustainable seafood cannot always be achieved with a one-size-fits-all approach. And different stakeholders, depending on their location and objectives, need to have choice to work with the solutions best suitable for them. So those 3 objectives are really at the core of what GSSI does. And as much as possible, for that, we use available solutions. But in case these are not available, we work to provide the seafood industry with those tools. So in summary, what we do is we create tools and solutions to amplify and build the confidence, clarity, and choice in the seafood sustainability. So what this looks like in practice is shown on the slide here. So GSSI process really starts with identifying a need. So where in the seafood sector is there a need for improved clarity, confidence, and choice? And these needs are identified by our partners because, as said, we are a partner-led organization. Once the needs have been identified, partners collaborate to think on how we can actually tackle this issue. Then we identify internationally accepted reference documents. So we have a starting point of consensus from where we build a solution. And when building the actual solution, we bring back in the partner industry expertise, assuring the solution can also work on the ground and on the water, leading to a workable solution, but also a credible solution based on internationally accepted reference documents. So both the internationally accepted reference documents and the integration of the partner industry expertise are really key components reaching those workable, credible Gssi solutions. So the prime example of this process was the global benchmark tool. So there was a need to provide more confidence, clarity, and choice in seafood certification because of the many seafood certification programs out there. It was hard to understand which were credible enough or meeting the needs of our partners. The international reference documents that were consulted here were the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries and the FAO Guidelines for Eco-labeling. The framework was drafted then by our partners in working groups, and they really made sure that the framework could be applied to seafood certification schemes with different approaches towards sustainability, and that the bar that would be set at a level that meets the expectations of the industry. So this process yielded in the launch of the Global Benchmark Tool already in 2015, which since then has benchmarked and recognized 9 seafood certification schemes. So moving on to the benchmark tool, more specifically on the content and the objective of this tool. I'd like to do this first by looking at the subject of benchmarking, so third-party certification schemes. Then I'll provide an introduction to the framework, what is it based on and how is it structured. And third, I'll provide an overview of the benchmark process, so the process that is used to assess whether or not a scheme is in alignment with the benchmark tool. So altogether, it should give you the who, what, and how of our benchmark tool. Starting with third-party certification. So taking a step back for a moment, when we think about seafood certification, why do we certify? What is really the objective here? So first, certification is a way to provide assurance to customers, so they can be sure that they have a sustainable product without having to do any due diligence themselves. Because this sustainability of production is assured by certification, but to have a certification that can provide this assurance, what do we really need? For this, we need clarity of the seafood, credibility of the seafood certification program. And when we say clarity, we can think about that in 2 main pillars. So first is to assure the independence, transparency, and reliability of the certification. And second is to assure that we have stakeholder involvement. So you're transparent on what you do. You allow stakeholders to be involved with that process. So for instance, they have the ability to provide any comments to what you're doing. This is really essential to build that trust and credibility for those that wish to be certified, but also those that wish to source the certified product. We then look at the certification system itself. We can distinguish 3 types of certification globally, starting with first party. So first party certification is not much more than a self-declaration. So the same organization is writing and checking a standard for itself. It doesn't really meet that credibility that I spoke about. Second party is one group writing the standard and another one complying with the standards. So this is very typical for buyer-seller relations. It has a bit more of a checks and balances system because the buyer is checking the producer, not the producer checking itself. But still, second party certification is not a very transparent system, nor does it really involve stakeholders. Which brings us to the subject of our benchmark tool, which is a third-party certification. This is the system if you really want to assure credibility as a seafood certification scheme. it's called third party because you have those that set the standard, party one, those that check the standard, party two, and those that check whether those checking the standard are actually capable and competent to do that check, which forms your third party. So the structure of a third party certification scheme should look like this. So if we would apply this to IndoGAP, being the scheme owner, you'll see it on the left. So IndoGAP is setting the standard, but it's also setting a management system, for instance, on how a certification process is conducted. So IndoGAP needs to be independent from those going to the farm to verify the conformity with their standard, which is the certification body, also referred to as the CB. And this CB needs to be accredited by an accreditation body that accredits that CB to assess the farm against the IndoGAP standard. Usually multiple CBs can do assessments for a scheme owner. And the global benchmark tool only benchmarks these third-party seafood certification schemes. And for that, this whole system is very essential. So the tool itself, it really focuses on the scheme owner. It also only recognizes the scheme owner, but it is the scheme owner that's responsible for managing this whole system. And the benchmark tool will therefore verify that the scheme owner has put a proper third-party system in place, where there is sufficient independence between the groups and where all the groups follow the required procedures. So I hope that has provided some clarity on what we mean when we say third-party certification. Then I'd now like to provide an overview of our benchmark framework. So keeping in the back of our mind the third-party certification system, this system is described in two FAO guidelines. So the FAO Marine Eco-Labeling Guidelines and FAO Technical Guidelines for Aquaculture Certification, together referred to as the FAO Guidelines. These were drafted to provide guidance on the management and application of certification of seafood, and the global benchmark tool is grounded on these guidelines together with the FAO Code of Conduct. So the benchmark tool that has then resulted out of this and that we work with contains a comprehensive framework on the basis of which alignment of the scheme is assessed. The framework consists of components divided over 4 different sections. All sections combined, you're speaking about 186 essential components, which are components with which a scheme must be in alignment, and 137 supplementary components, which are optional components. And these components exist to show that there's different approaches to sustainability by the different seafood certification schemes. But as said, there's no requirement to be in alignment with a certain number of them. And then finally, to assess the alignment of the schemes, a 7-step process is followed. And this is a process I will speak in a bit more detail about later. But first elaborate a little bit more on that framework and its different sections. So these are the 4 sections of the framework. So starting on the upper left side, we have section A, the first section, and it relates to the governance of the seafood certification scheme. In other words, procedures that the scheme owner should have in place to ensure it's functioning in a way that is essential for a credible scheme. So for instance, facilitating stakeholder engagement, allowing for complaints and appeals to be filed with the scheme owner, transparency of their operations, and a proper management of the eco-label in case the scheme owner has one. The second section is section B on the operational management of the scheme. The components in this section relate to the functioning of the accreditation body and the certification body, and the chain of custody standards. So the benchmark tool is directed at scheme owner, as I mentioned, since they're really the subject of benchmarking. But there are many essential components in this section that describe the requirements for an accreditation body and a certification body that the scheme owner works with. But because this scheme owner is expected to manage the system and assure that the AB and CB have these core requirements in place, both section A and B, they will have components which will be phrased in a way that it mentions the scheme owner assures that, or the scheme owner is expected to define that, just to give two examples of the type of components that can be expected there. So moving on to section C or D, which are sections that benchmark the standards of the program. So C for any aquaculture standards and D for any fishery standards. If a scheme only has an aquaculture standard, for instance, this standard will be benchmarked against section C alone. And in case the scheme owner has multiple aquaculture standards for different species, for instance, each of these standards that the scheme owner wishes to include in the GSSI recognition will need to be benchmarked against all the essential components of this section. Section D does the same, but then for a wild capture standard. The component of these sections mention what is expected to be put in the standard. And therefore the scheme owner there will mention what the components there will always mention what should be listed in a standard. So a standard should require that type of components. So not really taking that perspective anymore from the scheme owner and what's required for their operation, but really looking at what the scheme owner should have included in their standard. So looking at these sections, you will have this complete overview of our framework, which can seem a bit daunting at first maybe. So here it shows all the sections, but under those sections, the framework is further categorized into performance areas and topics. So the performance areas are the first tier of categorization, and they're listed at the top with a number followed after the number of the section. So looking at section C, for instance, in the bottom left corner, you can see that there are 8 performance areas, and under these performance areas, you'll have different topics, some of which will occur under different performance areas. And this topic is the second tier of categorization. So those really help to structure the framework of the tool and all those components. So each component can be scaled under a categorization, and meaning that each component falls under both a performance area and a topic. Sometimes you'll find multiple components under one performance area and topic. Sometimes it will just be the one. So looking at that specifically on a component level, an example is given here. So this is an example for section C on the aquaculture standard. So under section C, you have performance area 4, which concerns feed use. And under this performance area, you can find the topic of environmental consideration of feed ingredients. So one of the topics, the components that falls under this categorization is C4.04. And on the right, you can see that component in more detail. So each component consists of the component text, which is really leading when assessing whether a scheme owner aligns with the component. And in addition to the component text, guidance is given to provide further clarity on what is required from the scheme owner. And at times it also provides examples of good practices. So each component also includes a reference to the relevant paragraph of the guidelines or code of conduct, explaining how the GSSI component is grounded in these reference documents. Often it will not only include a reference to the paragraph, but also a brief explanation on the interpretation. And finally, in case there's any supplementary components linked to the essential components, they will also be listed there. So moving on to our final topic for the benchmark tool, which is the benchmark process. On this slide, you see what we call the benchmarking cycle. So that assures a cycle of continuous benchmarking and monitoring of schemes, and with that, providing an ongoing confidence in the GSSI recognized schemes. So this cycle starts as soon as a scheme is recognized, which is the first cycle on the left, circle on the left, and then moving on to the right at about 1 to 1.5 years after recognition, the scheme will be reviewed during the monitoring of continued alignment or MOCA process. Besides the cycle of having recognition and later a MOCA review, we also have a review of our framework every few years, and following a launch of a new version of our framework, each scheme owner is expected to be benchmarked again against that new framework. So with this continuous cycle, we can ensure that the recognized schemes are regularly checked, and with that, we can always assure that they are fully aligned with the content of our tool, and also that the information we provide to our stakeholders is up to date. But before a scheme can become part of this continuous review cycle, it needs to become a GSSI recognized schemes. And for this, we have our benchmarking process. So this process runs from step 1, the application by the scheme owner, to the recognition, which is step 6, and the MOCA after recognition. So on the right side, you'll see all the groups that are involved with this process, such as the scheme owner, so IndoGAP, for instance, the Secretariat, which I am presenting today, but also our steering board, independent experts, benchmark committee, and of course, stakeholders during the public consultation. An inclusion of these different groups in the process contributes greatly to the credibility of our process, and with that also to the credibility of the outcome there. So I will do a quick run through of the process, mentioning the involvement of all these groups with the relevant step. So the process starts with the application of the scheme owner, and it's then assessed by the independent experts during step 2 and 3 on the desktop review and office visit. If the independent expert recommends recognition of the scheme, the work of the independent expert is checked in step 4 by our quality control group, the benchmark committee. They agree with the recommendation of the expert. An interim benchmark report shows the result of assessing the scheme owner against the framework, and it will be published for a public consultation, inviting stakeholders to review the results and provide input. Following the closing of the consultation, comments are considered, but if the independent experts and benchmark committee continue to recommend the recognition of the scheme, then the steering board of GSSI will be asked to vote on the recognition of the scheme. So this process, so from step 1 to 6, it takes on average, I'd say between 6 and 12 months. And if a process is longer, this is usually because the application and the desktop review step require a lot of time. And this is especially the case when a scheme owner doesn't have all the required documentation available yet before starting with the application, or if it's unclear what is expected of them. And so for that reason, we often recommend to start with a pre-assessment, which is a process which is a lot shorter, and it is a process that doesn't lead to any recognition by GSSI, but it's really to show the scheme owner to what extent they currently align with the benchmark tool, and therefore, if there is a gap, that this is identified so the scheme owner can concentrate its efforts on closing those gaps before applying to a full benchmarking process. So it consists only of the application by the scheme owner and then an assessment by the independent experts of that application. And at the end, there will be a discussion on the results, making sure that we give the scheme owner all the information that they need to continue their work towards a benchmark application. So we highly recommend to start with a pre-assessment before a benchmarking process, and we've also had several recognized schemes for which this has proven successful. An example of this is Mel Japan, who started their pre-assessment and closed it in 2017. They started their benchmark process the following year, and by now they are in the middle of their MOCA review, so already almost closing that cycle. So with that, I've come to the end of the more general introduction to us as an organization and the benchmark tool. I'd like to pause here for questions before I give a brief introduction on the results of being recognized.
Okay, thank you, Eva, for the presentation. Before we go to the question and answers and or response from the two presenters, we would like to invite Pak Nima Brahmalian for giving us the short remarks related to the session this afternoon. Nima?
Thank you very much, Ibu Novia. Thank you, Eva, for this presentation. Always very interesting to listen to presentations from GSSI, always new aspects that brings light to the discussion indeed. Good afternoon again, also, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy to be part of this presentation and workshop. And indeed, very happy to see the work that UNIDO and Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Affairs started together also with GSSI back in 2015 has come a long way. It has been more than 8 years of collaboration. So I'm very happy that of this continued collaboration and partnership. And in the meantime, we have really witnessed the government and the ministry's efforts and steps in improving its fisheries and aquaculture, and enhancing the quality assurance system for its seafood products. Over the years, we have also been fortunate enough to be able to support this process, first through Smart Fish Program and now the GQSP. And also at the meantime, we have been also following the development of GSSI benchmarking tool from 2015 to now. And we know that new benchmark number 2 is also coming up, including also social assessment, which is very interesting development as well. So it's very interesting to see how on both sides there have been a lot of developments, very interesting developments. From UNIDO's point of view, the work on IndoGAP by the ministry and its benchmarking by GSSI is critically important for many reasons. First of all, because the efforts of the government to streamline its certification schemes along the value chain of fisheries products under one umbrella and naming it in IndoGAP and organizing its efforts on quality assurance under one umbrella has led, and it's going to lead to much more effectiveness and reduction of cost of certification and transparency along the value chain. That's a very critical step, and therefore recognition of this certification would be a value added to the scheme. Secondly, the government has a strong emphasis to enhance its export. In particular, we are speaking, for instance, on shrimps, which would be the focus of the IndoGAP. And recognizing that this enhancement of export would not be possible by focusing only on production or only on export, but rather it's a combination of different improvements that needs to take place. At the same time, sustainability of the efforts and sustainability of the aquaculture sector is critical for Indonesia. and it would allow the sector to grow in future sustainably, in particular with reference to small-scale producers. So therefore, it is important that IndoGAP also moves towards a sustainability certification. And the last reason that why we think it's very important is because the global export market is not always a level playing ground for everyone. And GSSI's, in a way, underlying logic is to provide that confidence in perhaps less recognized schemes, that they would become on par and equivalent to many of the recognized schemes and reputable schemes in the global market. For a small producer of shrimp, accessing expensive certification schemes may be out of reach, but accessing a national certification scheme, it would be. And if that national certification scheme is, of course, recognized, it would create the possibility for that small producer to also sell in export markets. And at the same time, creates the confidence in the consumers that they can buy and be comfortable and confident that this product is sustainable. So therefore, we think this is an important initiative, and it embodies and summarizes all the efforts of the government in improving the fisheries and aquaculture and improving the export. And it would be also one of the very few, if not the first, schemes coming of a national state after Ireland, maybe the second scheme that would become recognized. And it's an important step, and it's an important statement by Indonesia in the seafood export market. So we would be very happy to closely support this initiative, and I am very happy that this workshop has been organized, and I'm thankful to the colleagues at DG Aquaculture and Competitiveness for providing all the support, and also putting together a very strong team that is following up and working with full of effort on IndoGAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Nima. Do you mind if I just a little bit translated what we have, just to give a resume to all the participants? Bapak dan Ibu, tadi kita sudah dengarkan apa yang disampaikan baik oleh Ibu Eva maupun Pak Nima. Pada dasarnya GSSI menjadi satu wadah untuk kita bisa mendapatkan recognition agar sejajar, dan yang penting adalah impact-nya. Kesempatan buat pelaku usaha Indonesia memasuki kancah perdagangan yang lebih luas, lebih dikenal, dan akan utamanya tadi disampaikan oleh Nima, menolong pelaku usaha kecil yang mungkin tidak mempunyai effort sebesar pelaku usaha besar. Nah, kesempatan ini perlu dilakukan tidak dengan mudah. Ada upaya yang harus ditempuh, dan itu artinya kita harus sama-sama bekerja sama untuk mengikuti benchmarking yang tadi yang tadi diperkenalkan oleh Eva. For the next session, I would like to invite the two discussants, Prof. Kenda and Ibu Devi, to give a question or response related to the presentation shared by Eva in the first session. Please, Pak Kenda, who said that would like to.
Terima kasih.
Yes.
Terima kasih, Bu Novia. Tolong diterjemahkan.
Oke, Pak. Oke.
Ada banyak pertanyaan, saya ada berapa? 13 pertanyaan.
Masya Allah.
Tapi 3 aja lah. 1.
Yes.
Apakah skema sertifikasi yang telah di-benchmarking oleh GSSI itu didevelop oleh pemerintah atau oleh produsen atau oleh customer atau oleh NGO kebanyakan?
Oh, oke. Satu dulu atau kita?
Dua.
Oke.
Nomor 2. Oke. Ya. Tadi kan step-stepnya banyak tuh ya untuk di benchmarking. Kalau tidak ada salah ada 7. Pada step mana yang paling kritikal dihadapi oleh pemohon untuk bisa pas dengan benchmarking oleh GSSI? Oke.
Oke.
Nomor 3. Dalam kondisi normal, berapa lama suatu skema sertifikasi bisa lolos benchmarking oleh GSSI? Ya, dalam kasus tertentu contohkan benchmarking mana yang paling cepat dan mana yang paling lambat. Kalau yang tidak jadi kan udah tahu kita IndoGAP ya. Oke Bu, itu dulu Bu. Ya.
Okay, I'm sorry. There will be three questions. First, the certification scheme that been benchmark, where they come owned by, the owner of the standard and certification scheme, whether it comes from the farmers, the government, or the NGO. And then the second, which step is the most critical during the benchmarking process? And then the third one, in the normal condition, how long it will take to pass this benchmarking process? That's the question from Pak Sukenda.
Okay, thank you. I will now give an answer to those 3 questions. So first, so on the slide here, you see the 9 recognized schemes that we have currently. So speaking of the owner of these schemes, there's one that is government owned, which is BIM, which is the one in the middle. And then for the other ones, it's mainly private organizations that were really found to be a scheme owner, but there is a few exceptions. There's definitely different possibilities. For instance, Gulf, you'll see on the left side, it's funded by a nature institute, and the best aquaculture practice you'll see on the upper right side. It's quite a big organization, that the Global Aquaculture Alliance, that works on aquaculture, and the certification program is only part of what they do. But what you'll see with most of the schemes is that it's a scheme owner, and the certification program really lies at the core of their business. And so it's a private organization funded for that purpose specifically. So talking about the process, so the question which step is most critical, and how long the process generally takes. So the process generally takes 6 to 12 months, and that is quite a big range, and that is mainly because it's the most important step for not so much the process, but really for the like having a process that can follow timelines. So you can, after each review, you can move on to the next step because you have all the required information to take the next step. Therefore, the really core step will be the application step by the scheme owner. So if a scheme owner really understands what is expected of them, and therefore make sure that for the application that they have all the right documentation to provide to us, but also when going through the Excel and when going through the application, making sure that they provide us with a lot of detail on why they think they're in alignment, and also with all that documentation. Because if this is not done really well in the beginning, what you'll see is that during the process, so during the next step, so the review by the independent experts, is that they'll have to go back to the scheme owner to request more information, or maybe at a later stage, the benchmark committee would like to request some more information. So really, that's why we emphasize quite strongly with scheme owners, if you wish to start the benchmark process, we recommend to do a pre-assessment so you have a really good understanding of what is expected, and you have a check by the experts making sure that you have all the documentation in place. So I hope that answers the questions on the process. And yeah, if that's done really well, I think the process would take a little bit closer to 6 months. If that does require more time, it could be that the process takes up to 12 months, or that it can't be finalized the first time because you have to go back to add more documentation to your system. There are certain procedures maybe that you're missing, and that just takes a lot of time.
Okay, thank you very much, Iva. Pak Sukenda, so you got the answers, and before you respond to those statements, I will invite Ibu Debbie. Any other question from Bu Debbie?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation, Ms. Eva. And for now, I would like to ask you some questions. There are some. The first one is, what is the benefit of joining the scheme of the GSSI? It's like we can see that the ION is one of the supporter, isn't it? So once that we recognized by GSSI, will IndoGAP certified farms will be accepted in the ION chain in the whole world, or is there any arrangement for that? Or for the other market chains that stated on your presentation, will benefit for us once we are recognized. And for the country matter, is there any country that will soften the requirement once that we are recognized by GSSI? And also, if we talk about the EU is one of our important buyer. For instance, that GSSI based in EU, will EU consider that the status of the GSSI benchmarking as a compliance of EU requirements? Couple months ago, from the EU informed us that they will not only require the food safety food safety regulation, but also it's about the sustainability, the environment responsibility, and other things that which are already included in our national standard in IndoGAP. So once that we are recognized by GSSI, will EU also, note the status as our compliance? That's the first question. It's about the benefit in the market change country or as a buyer in EU. And the second thing is there any changes from the assessment tools that used in 2015 compared with the latest version that we will use for the next benchmark, whether it is minor or major changes? We would like to have the information about that, because we have some experience when we fulfill the application in 2015, and maybe we can use the same more or less answers if the assessment tools is not of changed too much. And the third question, have GSSI consider our inputs when we conducted our pilot benchmarking in 2015. The first input is Indonesia as a tropical country. We have tropical aquaculture that should be considered. It is different with those in Europe or in US. And the second thing is the gap between the GSSI requirements regarding the public information for of the clients that shall be public, shall be publicated from the certification body. There are some gap against the ISO 17011 that used by our national or accreditation body. So for those two inputs, have GSSI consider about it? Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for those questions. So to start with the benefit of a GSSI, being a GSSI recognized scheme, and specifically the market access. So what you'll see here is an overview really of the global benchmark tool at work. So it's the objective, well, really the outcome of our tool is that it provides clarity to simplify both the sourcing policy and the messaging of our GSSI partners, but also other retailers. So there's a lot of buyers that use the outcome of the GSSI benchmark tool, and this way they can refer to one group of recognized certification programs and feel confident in referring to these programs. Also because of the continuous monitoring and updating cycle that I explained earlier. So the benchmarking is not a one and done process, but an ongoing process in assuring confidence. And because of that, partners and other retailers, they feel confident in referring to the schemes that we have recognized. So you'll see there's quite a few retailers that have included a reference to GSSI recognized schemes as a whole in their sourcing policies, instead of only referring to the schemes that they know and they trust. So yeah, I definitely do have a lot of confidence that being a recognized scheme for IndoGAP would provide that access, because there by now, I believe it's 18 out of the top 50 retailers that reference GSSI in their sourcing policies. And this is a number we continuously work on to grow. And Aeon is an example of that, for instance, but also Ahold, Kroger, Walmart, Aldi South, and many other large global retailers. So on your other question for the EU requirements, what I can say is there is no legal effect to us having recognized a scheme. We're a private organization, and it cannot help to maybe change any regulations that would otherwise apply to you. But as I said, I am confident that the GSSI recognition gives you recognition at a bar of sustainability that will be recognized also on the European market. So on the updates of the framework, so we have completed a first revision process, and we are planning to launch that second version of our benchmark tool this year. Later this year will most likely be sometime this summer. And the focus of that revision has really been on implementing a few new FAO guidelines, which were only implemented for supplementary components. and also to really take the lessons learned from the last 5 years working with the tool and providing additional clarity in the framework, and where possible, make it more efficient. So the changes you'll see from version 1 to version 2, they will not be major, and I expect they might help even because there is some restructuring, there is a few less components, but really the content of that framework is the same. It's just tweaked here and there to make sure that it's a bit more user-friendly, and with that should also help facilitate the application of the scheme owner. So I definitely recommend those outcomes from the IndoGAP pilot, even though they were from 2015, they're still very much valid because the requirements that were set at that time, they're still set. So the only thing I would warn for is make sure you have the right component number, because due to the restructuring, there is a bit of changes there, but content-wise, really largely looking at the same framework. On the considered input given at the pilot, I am not, this is a bit of history, I'm not 100% sure on the answer because it was a bit before my time. But I know we are continuously, and we've also done this during the revision, have more engagement with small scale fisheries or farms, and also in with a good geographical representation. So we have also had engagement with some farms in Asia, and I hope this has helped to revise the framework a bit in a way that it can be seen how it would also apply to a different farming context, like in the case of Indonesia as a tropical country. Okay, so I hope that answers the questions.
Okay, thank you, Eva. Do you mind if we ask Ibu Devi and Pak Kenda for 10 minutes presentation, sharing about what we've done in preparing the benchmarking process for IndoGAP, and then also Pak Kenda will share related to the shrimp Indonesia. So how is it, whether they are ready to be benchmarked? Who will be the first, whether Pak Sukenda or Ibu Devi? I will give it to you to start. 10 minutes for each.
Boleh, saya nggak Pak.
Oh ya, silakan. Please, Pak Kenda.
Oh, nggak bisa share ya?
Silakan dicoba lagi, Pak.
Okay. So thanks, Eva, for your presentation. I would like to telling about the Indonesian shrimp aquaculture profile from traditional semi-intensive and intensive model in Indonesia. So if we are talking about the world shrimp production, this is constantly increasing. It's about 1.4% per year. Yeah. So, but we know that mostly productions are coming from Asia. Yeah. it's Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thai, and now the rising country is India, I think. So this mostly come from Indonesia, Asia. And then if we look at the graph, we can look at the world stream increasing every year and mostly dominated by ASEAN countries. So we are a producer. So secondly, if you look at the total productions of the shrimp, mostly is coming from Venus Paname. Actually, that species is not originally from our country and our area. It's coming from the American. So already introduced to the farmer since 2001, and now dominated our culture species in Indonesia. So in contrastly, monodon is slightly decreased each year during a period of the 10 or 20 years. So we can say that Paname reaching about 80% of total productions of shrimp in Asia, also in Indonesia. So this is the importer country that, as we know, that mostly our importer country is targeted to US. So most shrimp from the Asia are coming to US, and the market is very competitive. Yeah? And the secondly is Japan, and maybe the Europe another. Oh, this is interesting data. Is aside from the PDS-KP is Directorate of the Production and Market of the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Affairs. The Indonesia is the second exporter coming to the US, after India, with a percent of the increasing about 14% each year. And then, if this is the estimated or projection market shrimp in the world, I mean the China and the secondly United States and the third Japan and Republic of Korea is the main importing. And if we look at the data starting from 2020 to 2024, the China increasing constantly, and if we estimated, China will consume the shrimp in the end of 2024 is about 1 million metric ton, and 800,000 coming from Panama, and the rest of them coming from the another species. So this is the projections of what we can contribute to the market in each country. It's China, United States, and Japan. So market is probably still open in China and in US. Okay. This is the shrimp produced by our country, and each year the production increase, and in 2018 is approximately 950,000 metric ton, is very high, and maybe more than 80% is exported to the US, Japan, and the other countries. So most province as producer of the shrimp in Indonesia is West Java, and then East Java, yeah, and then what is the Nusa Tenggara Barat, yeah, and then Lampung. So many area or many province in still develop the shrimp farm, and then for the next time maybe is Bengkulu, and then Padang. Padang is West Sumatra. Yeah, and then becoming the next producer of shrimp in Indonesia. So our target, yeah, as stated by the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Affairs in 2024, is 2 million metric ton, and 80% is coming from Peneus Faname. Okay, talking about the shrimp aquaculture development, I stated the McIntosh opinion there. There are many many system in shrimp culture in Indonesia. Yeah? The G1 is mostly extensive culture or traditional culture. This is no aeration. The farm is very big, yeah, between 5 and 30 hectare, and the productivity is very low, and sometimes also no feed. And the G2 is we add the aerations, and the density also increasing, feed also giving, and the productivity increasing between 3 to 10 tons per hectare. And the size of the pond also small comparing to the extensive or G1 generations. And then the next is semi-intensive culture, with the modification of the culture system by implemented the biosecurity system, and then domesticated of the broodstock, also PLs. So we can stock the PL more higher, and then the productivity also higher comparing to the G2 and G1. And the size of ponds also smaller and smaller. And G4 is meant what we say that intensive or super intensive culture. This is the more complicated system, and only 2% of the farmer apply this system, yeah, by using recirculation, shrimp toilets, aeration also more added. Also, automatic feeder also constructed in the pond, and then the productivity higher, and the farm is more smaller and smaller, become 2,000 until 5,000 meters square. And then the last is G5. It's mean the very advanced shrimp culture in the world, also in Indonesia. I think this is totally recirculations, west of the shrimp captured and then reuse again, more controllable, particularly for the environmental and disease. Yeah. And the productivity are higher, reaching the 60 tons per hectare. And again, the farm is more smaller and the smaller. How about in Indonesia? Mostly in Indonesia is G1, G2, G3, and G4 culture system. And until now, we don't have fully recirculated shrimp culture. So if we look at the estimated shrimp farm in Indonesia, intensive culture is about 6,000 hectares, comparing the semi-intensive 16,000 and traditional 300 hectares. So if we are comparing the intensive only 2% of the total area, comparing extensive and traditional more than 80%, I mean the 98%. So this is the situation of farm situation in Indonesia. This is very different and with in other countries maybe, because some countries already developed the intensification. So if we are talking about the development products system or technology development for the shrimp culture, so we are now moving forward to the generation 5. This very, I mean, this is the future aquaculture or the future shrimp farming in the world, also in Indonesia. So if we produce 5 million tons in 1 year, yeah, if we use generations 1, this is we need 1,750,000 hectares. But if we use generation 4, we only need 35,000 hectares land for shrimp farming. This is very, very intensive and then very efficient for using the land for shrimp farming. So in the next time in Indonesia, modern shrimp farming is mean the high density and recirculation. Some countries already practicing the model, this model or this technology, and then Indonesia, I mean, within 1 or 2 years next, also we are trying for the modern shrimp farming in totally recirculation technology system. Okay. The second one is about stakeholder in shrimp farming industry in Indonesia. We categorize in the primary stakeholder and a secondary stakeholder. Yeah. In the primary stakeholder, we put the supplier, seed, feed, facility, or the chemical, and another is producer from small to the company, to the for corporation, to the big company, also available in Indonesia, and also trader processing and packaging, and exporter agent, and some of them also we have all the middleman. So which is the middleman is I mean the middleman. Yeah? And then the secondary stakeholder is main customer, training provider, quality assurance and certification groups like Gssi, might be a government and interest group of the in the aquaculture and environmental. So, however, there are what is the difference opinions or difference difference opinion between the primary stakeholder and secondary stakeholder. In the primary stakeholder, they are only thinking about the shrimp production, how big the shrimp productivity, and then how much the benefit, and then how much the welfare of the farmer, and also environmental. This is very different in the secondary stakeholder. So in the secondary stakeholder, might be we are thinking about the food safety and quality, environmental responsibility, social concern, animal welfare, and others might be. And then how make the primary stakeholder thinking and the secondary stakeholder thinking are met. So this is what it's called sustainable shrimp farming or sustainable aquaculture. The only how to proceed this situation. Okay, this is responsible shrimp farming. That mean the responsible for environmental, responsible for social aspect, and responsible for food safety. We can use the implementation good aquaculture practices during shrimp culture and certification process. The last might be in Indonesia, there is the process coming from hatchery, grow out, also what is the cold storage and the market. So in hatchery, we have a big backyard hatchery. Backyard hatchery is mean small hatchery, this family business hatchery. And then hatchery, full hatchery, it's mean the big hatchery, company business. And the backyard hatchery and full hatchery also sell to the grow out to the farmer. With we in the grow out, there are traditional farmer, semi-intensive farmer, and intensive farmer, and the farmer will sell the product to the processing plant by directly to the processor or by middleman. And then middleman will collect the shrimp for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the other farmer, and then they send the shrimp to the processor. And the market, as we know, that is a domestic market and export market. Yeah. So the export market may be more than 90% comparing to the domestic market. So we have to identify the critical aspect in the hatchery, in the grow out, also in the processor regarding the what is the food safety, environmental, social, and also the traceability. Thank you very much, Bu Novia.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Pak Sukenda. So next, Ibu Debbie will be give a brief presentation related to the IndoGAP. Time is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ibu Novia. Allow me to maybe give the brief information about what we are thinking about this benchmarking. So there are two parts of the FAO technical guidelines. First is the standard, and the other is about the scheme or the procedural of the certification and accreditation. So EVA and other GSSI counterparts, maybe we would like to have the references used by the GSSI when you were developing the assessment tools. So I will explain about the urgency of these reference materials. Because when we were doing our the benchmarking piloting project in 2015, we found some unable implemented requirements that compared to our condition here in Indonesia. The first is for the prohibit the trash fish. For the shrimp culture, we don't use the trash fish, but for the rural culture, like in a sea cage in Papua, in Maluku, in some very remote area, we hardly find the industrial feed. It is very expensive there, and it is not economically accepted by them because the production cost will be very high, and the use of the trash fish is like a very extensive. It's not endangering the species in the area, and some other considerations. So this is our our consideration that we would like to propose GSSI to to think about it. We don't maybe for the benchmarking process this year, we will not involve the CKH standard. Maybe we only use the stream for the first step of the benchmarking, isn't it, Professor Sukenda? We prefer the stream stream grow out of farm. So maybe this first clausule will not be a problem in this year, but it is also important for us to think about it for the other system of the species. And the second thing is the sustainable source of the feed raw materials. I want to raise this to inform the feed and medicine directorate, Pak Michael and friends, yeah, because we just started to to consider about the sustainability of the raw material sources. So since it is just started, so it is not established very well. So maybe we have to think about it also. And the third thing is about the fish health management. So Eva, you mentioned about the assessment tools of the 2015 and the latest version could be not very different. So maybe this statement is also there. The fish health management target is to increase the survival rate. So for Indonesia, we have like a range of survival rate, and it is like let's say 70 to 80%, and it is almost impossible to raise it. It's like make it 80 to 90%. So the fish health management's goal in Indonesia is just to keep the fish as healthy as possible, and to make the harvest is possible to be achieved, not to have like a disease. So maybe this statement could be reviewed. These are some of our founding when we were get the benchmark assessment tools from the GSSI and the scheme. So we mentioned about the difference about the requirement of the GSSI, maybe because of the GSSI have the different platform scheme for the accreditation and certification, and you require the public information for the clients, like for the founding of the audits and some other information. For ISO 17011, it is really it is like a prohibit for the certification body to inform the founding or some other like a private information from the clients to go for the public. So these are our considerations. And also, we would like to inform you about the involved parties for the benchmarking. For the standard, yeah, maybe you will involve with the, we have the technical commission standard or komisi teknis. It is under our Badan Standarisasi Nasional, but it is like a branch of the BSN in our ministry. We have the number 6507 for the Aquaculture Technical Commission of Standards. So maybe for the standard settings and everything, we will discuss, or we will have a in-depth interview for the for the benchmarking process. And also the certification bodies audit division. I would like to inform the lembaga sertifikasi di Jepara, Sukabumi, dan di Takalar, ya, untuk bersiap di sini, because we will take a look at the the checklist and all the documents. Is it fulfill or comply with the standards of the GSSI. And also for the scheme, you will deal with Komite Akreditasi Nasional. Komite Akreditasi Nasional is a member of ILAC, IPAC, and every other cooperation of accreditation in the whole world. So this is our owner accreditation scheme at the national level. And the second is the Bandar Standarisasi Nasional, because the IndoGAP standards is not the mandatory standard. It is voluntary ones. So the owner of the certification scheme is in the Badan Standarisasi Nasional. And the third party is the certification body's management as a certifier. So those are the parties that we have to be, if we have to involve them, we have to inform them at the very first steps in order to make this benchmarking smoothly. Eva, as I mentioned about the reference materials, we would like to have the request, is it possible for us to have the assessment tools to be assisted with the reference materials for each components? Why is it important? Because we would like to understand the background of each components. And the second is when we would like to revise our standards based on the GSSI inputs, we have to confident the Technical Commission of Standardization, the one with the number 6507, yeah, Aquaculture Technical Commission. They have to be confident first before they approve to revise the standards. So for your information, the Technical Commission standardization consists of the producer, the consumer, the academics, the government, and other stakeholders that are regulated in our standardization guidelines, standardization setting guidelines. That's all what I would like to share. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ibu Debbie. I hope Eva got the brief condition, general condition during past 5 years, and then it will be create a new discussion in the future. Maybe not today, if it will be a long discussion. So I leave it to Eva to respond and continue the presentation. Please, Eva, your time.
Yes, well, first, thanks for the very interesting presentation and recaps. That's very insightful for us to have a bit of an update on where the Indonesian industry stands now, but also the IndoGAP scheme. I have prepared a presentation to go a little bit more in detail of the benchmark tool specified for the case of IndoGAP. So giving a few examples, but also highlighting some of the conclusions from 2015. And then I'm also really looking forward to tomorrow to provide a few more responses and maybe have a bit more of a back and forth on how to move forward and continue to work on this together. So just gonna share my screen. You can all see my screen now with the slides. Let's see. So for this second presentation, as I mentioned, I'd like to go into the different performance areas that are relevant for IndoGAP, and then share a few success stories of existing certification and existing recognized certification, and with some of the results of the IndoGAP pilot and pre-assessment, so the conclusions that were provided by our independent experts. So here again, you'll see those 4 sections of the benchmark framework. So we were talking about this before, total of 186 essential components, 137 supplementary components, and 4 sections. So IndoGAP, of course, is a scheme working towards the application of a pre-assessment for their shrimp farming standard. So the application would not look so much like this, but more something like this. So because you're not looking actually at the wild capture standard, you only need to comply with the 126 essential components that are included in section A, B, and C. And additionally, supplementary components are not required for application. We do strongly encourage you to work towards them maybe at a later stage, because they can be really good to show your unique approach as a scheme, especially as a regional scheme. This can be very valuable, but it doesn't need to be your focus point yet, now that you're working to still develop a roadmap towards that pre-assessment. So with that, I hope that the framework may seem a little bit less daunting. I'd now like to dive into those 3 sections that we do need to look at. So beginning with section A and B on governance and operational management. So section A concerns the governance of a scheme. In other words, procedures that the scheme owner needs to have in place to ensure it's functioning in a way that is essential for a credible scheme. So as I mentioned, each section has specific performance areas to categorize the different components. And for section A, those performance areas are scheme governance, scheme management, and their standard setting and maintenance. Then for section B, which sets the requirements for the accreditation body and the certification body in performance area B1 and B2. Finally, we have B3, the final performance area, and it sets the requirements for a chain of custody standard, which needs to be put in place to assure all certified products are identified and segregated from non-certified products throughout the supply chain. So I think we've spoken quite a bit now on the importance of this section A and B, of the management system of a scheme owner. And to show you what this looks like in practice, I'd like to move on to give you an example of a state-owned scheme that obtained GSSI recognition in 2019, because it is probably the scheme with most similarities to IndoGAP. So that scheme is BIM. BIM is the Ireland Seafood Development Agency. So it is a government agency, but it is also a scheme owner. Because they have developed their aquaculture standard to certify Irish fish farms. And this certified aquaculture program has been GSSI recognized by 2019. And at this time, there's 17 certified entities against this standard. So to give a brief impression on the governance structure of BIM. While it is a government agency, it is governed by a board, of which only the chairman is appointed by the Minister of Food, Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And their work that they do in aquaculture certification, it's only part of the work that BIM does. And this work, it falls under the BIM aquaculture division. So their daily operations are managed by a CEO, which reports to the full board, and a so-called oversight committee, which is comprised of different stakeholders, so representative from the industry, research institutes, and NGOs. So if we think again about that third-party certification structure, this is what that looks like applied to BIM. So BIM, as the scheme owner, setting the standard and management system. Then we have the accreditation body, which is a national accreditation body, the Irish National Accreditation Board, an IAAF member. And this accreditation body accredits different, sorry, and this accreditation body accredits the different CBs that can verify compliance of a farm with the BIM standard. So you'll see a few details in the on the accreditation body and the CB body for BIM. They're definitely not exhaustive. There's many more details. But I'd like to mention that these details, they can really be found in that B1 and B2 performance area of section B of the benchmark framework. So really looking at the GSSI framework, it should really provide a lot of guidance on what is required for a proper third-party certification system. And that is also applicable to the situation of the scheme owner being a state agency. So moving on to the Aquaculture Standard. So Section C is the section against which a standard, like the SERM standard of IndoGAP, would be benchmarked. And this section has 8 performance areas highlighted in the slide here. So we have aquatic animal health management, chemical and veterinary drug use, environmentally responsible infrastructure construction, waste disposal and general storage, feed use, and impacts on habitat and biodiversity, seed species selection and escapes, and impact on water resources. So there's a few topics under these performance areas that are reoccurring, such as record keeping and compliance with national laws. But otherwise, I really recommend to take each performance area separately and consider carefully if they relate to the species standard, and also if there currently you expect there will be any gaps between the standard and what is required from the tool. So for the application to Section C, 2 things are very important. So that is the scope of application. So the application to be GSSI recognized, and the communication about this. So to start with the scope for the GSSI application, so the scope of recognition you wish to apply for, it is determined by the scheme that's applying. So in the case you have standards for different species, there's no obligation to include all the standards in the scope of application, but you could start with one standard and apply for a scope extension later, for instance. So there's definitely a bit of flexibility for the scheme owner in the scope of GSSI recognition. On 2 things, however, the framework is a bit less flexible. And first is that Section C is applicable to farm standards and not to feed or hatchery standards. And the second is that all these Section C components need to be met by that farm standards, so it can be assured that any farm that is certified against it falls within the scope of GSSI recognition. Meaning that the farm standard includes the required criteria on all the performance areas of the benchmark framework, so including feed, and that way that we can be certain that one standard assures compliance with all that Section C requires, and it will not be a bit of a mix between different standards. So in the past, we've had experience sometimes with schemes having other standards, or maybe an optional add-on of requirements. And when there were gaps with their farm standards, they've chosen to then integrate some of the criteria from other standards. So they were already working with them, but not yet in the farm standards, but chosen to integrate them. So they did come to one farm standard that they could apply to the GSSI benchmark tool, which could then lead to recognition. Another important topic I'd like to mention is the communication about the certification. So if a standard is part of GSSI recognition, it's important that there is consistency in what the certification against that standard represents. So there should be clear communication about the different levels of certification in case that is a system you work with, or there should be complete uniformity among the certified entities. So if a buyer sources from GSSI recognized schemes, it will source from a certified product that falls under the scope of GSSI recognition. It should therefore be very clear to that buyer which products fall under that scope and which do not. So another important thing to consider here is eco-labels. So while GSSI is a B2B organization, not so much a consumer-facing organization, an eco-label can definitely play an important role here. Eco-labels are often an important method chosen by the scheme owner to communicate to the consumer. And this eco-label should really enable the consumer to understand simply by looking at the eco-label whether or not the product is certified by a scheme that falls under GSSI recognition. So I'd like to give two examples of these 2 points of GSSI recognized schemes and their eco-labels to show the importance of the scope of recognition and also the communication about certification. So I hope that with these examples, I'll show that there's definitely different approaches possible to eco-labels and the scope of recognition, but that it is important for this, we always keep the need for clarity in the back of our minds. So first example is best aquaculture practices. It's a third-party scheme from the Global Aquaculture Alliance. And the BAP program has standards encompassing the entire production chain, so including farms, processing plants, feed mills, and hatcheries. And for this, the BAP program uses a so-called star-based system. So each star on the BAP label represents part of the farm seafood supply chain. The hatchery, the farm, the feed mill, and the processing plant. So BAP is capable of certifying each stage of this production chain, and their star system signifies the level of certification. So for instance, when a processing plant and associated farm have attained certification, a 2-star designation is given. When associated hatcheries and or females also attain the BAP certification, a 3 or 4-star designation can be achieved. So examples of the corresponding eco-labels are shown on the slide here. And this program, so the BAP program, has been GSSI recognized since 2017 for their finfish and crustacean standard and their salmon standard. So looking at this from their star system, it means that the 2-star certification is GSSI recognized. So put differently, you could source 2-star BAP certified products or anything above, and this will fall under the GSI recognition. So this was done because while BAP does have those separate standards to certify hatchery or feed mills, the farm standard in itself was able to comply with all the essential components of Section C, including those on, for instance, feed use. And in that way, we were able to recognize this scheme in a way that it is very clear for everyone what falls under the GSSI recognition. So in addition to the example of BAP, I'd like to give a completely different example, but also relating to eco-labels and the scope of GSSI recognition. So Marine Eco-Label Japan was recognized in December 2019, and they were recognized following a pre-assessment and later successfully completed benchmark process. They were already at that time operating a first version of their fishery management standard. However, significant changes needed to be made to come to version 2 of their male fisheries management standard, which was the version that was recognized by GSSI. So since version 2 at that time of recognition was relatively new, there would still be certified entities under version 1 of their standard. Those that would still be applying could only apply for version 2, but the farms that were already previously certified under version 1, they were giving a fair amount of time to actually prepare for the certification under V2. So therefore, Mel was asked to work with 2 eco-labels because there was quite a difference between the version 1 and the V2. So one for the certified entities under V1 of the standard, and another one that were certified under V2 of their standard. So for this, a V1 or a V2 was added to their eco-label. This was very important so we could provide clarity on what the GSSI recognition referred to. So for this, Mel communicated a clear explanation of the V1 and V2 logo differentiation until the end of the transition period, which was about 14 months after the GSSI recognition, so expired just a few months ago. And at the same time, GSSI has always communicated that they recognize MEL V2 instead of just MEL or the MEL Fisheries Management Standards. So I think this gives a good example of how a relatively easy solution could provide a solution to having better clarity on the scope of GSSI recognition. So I hope that these examples and success stories have given a good impression of the different approaches that are possible for recognition under the benchmark tool. So as we talked about previously, IndoGAP is definitely not new to GSSI because a piloting exercise already took place in 2015 and a pre-assessment in 2019. And therefore, I'd like to briefly recap the main outcomes of these processes. So these can be taken into careful consideration because I know following the last pre-assessment that it was advised to first go back and make a few changes as some gaps existed that stood in the way of moving forward with the benchmarking. So I'm excited that we're picking up that work again today. So some of the advices that were given, the first one is maybe already the most important one, and it was that there appeared to be no independent certification body to audit farms against the IndoGAP standards. As we've seen in the examples of the third-party system, it's quite common that an accreditation body, for instance, is a semi-public organization. And this could be completely fine, as we've seen in the BIM example, even for a state-owned organization. But what is critical is that there's a clear distance between the certification body and the scheme owner, and also between the certification body and the accreditation body. And because if there's not this distance and independence, then there's no true third-party certification system. And this should really be seen as a prerequisite for GSSI benchmarking. Secondly, a few notes were made on by our aquaculture experts on improvements for the application of the IndoGAP standard. So first, there was some clarity, unclarity on how to apply the system of having the 3 different standards to the benchmark framework. And to avoid this, to avoid any confusion there, it was recommended to focus on the grow-out standard for one species, which we're doing now with the shrimp standard specifically. I also hope that the BAP example contributes to give an example of how the framework should be approached, and in case that there are changes needed, that the framework is definitely able to provide some guidance on what could be and should be included in that grow-out standard as a minimum. Second, any benchmark process, no matter whether you're speaking about a pre-assessment or a process to be GSSI recognized, it starts with the application of the scheme owner. And as I've emphasized, this is a very important step because it really determines the continuation of the process. And it is important, therefore, that the scheme owner during this application stage already can be as specific as it can be in providing the information that is needed to assess alignment with the components. In the past, the information that was provided was at times maybe insufficiently clear exactly on why this should lead to a conclusion of the scheme being in alignment. And therefore, often the independent expert, he couldn't determine if it was or was not in alignment. He could only determine that it appeared to be in alignment or that it was possibly in alignment. But specificity in both the provided information and the documentation is definitely key here. And on that specifically, with the pre-assessment, already having that specificity there, it really leads to an even better identification of any gaps that may still exist. So during the stage between the pre-assessment and the benchmarking, your efforts can really be focused towards only working on those gaps. And finally, is to give an impression of specific requirements that were not included, or maybe the information was not provided at the time, but that are required for essential components. There's a few performance areas that required more attention than others. C1, aquatic animal health management, C2, chemical and veterinary drug use, C5, impact on habitat and biodiversity, and C7, escapes. These were the ones that appear to require a little bit more attention than the other performance areas. So please note that for certain standards, it's definitely possible that certain components or performance area do not apply because the practices the performance area refers to is irrelevant of the farming of that species. But in that case, it's still important that the scheme owner make sure to provide documentation and argumentation why they don't have to show that they're in alignment with those components because it doesn't apply to their standard. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. So first, thanks a lot for your attention. I know it was quite a bit of information maybe to process. I definitely hope it's been helpful. Before I pass on the word again, I'd like to maybe give some final recommendations for those that will be working on the roadmap. So recommendation I always give to any scheme that wishes to apply to the benchmark tool. So since 2015, when the first IndoGAP pilot took place, I feel IndoGAP has been working a lot on their standards, but also we, GSSI as organization, have come a long way actually since then, because we were brand new at the time. But by now there's 9 schemes that are successfully recognized. And even though they have different approaches, we have managed to find a way to successfully integrate that in the benchmark framework and process. So now we have a set of 9 quite different schemes that are all perceived as a credible scheme in an equal manner. So when you're looking at the specific components of the benchmark tool, I expect that the component text, the guidance, and the FAO reference and interpretation definitely gives a good impression already of what is expected from the scheme owner. But also now we do have the luxury of actually having benchmark reports available of each recognized scheme. So I've highlighted a few examples during the presentation of different approaches that I think might be useful for you to understand. But I definitely recommend to have a good look at these reports as well, because I expect there will be many more examples of different approaches that might help to prepare for your pre-assessment. Also, please note that we are happy in the coming year, whenever moving forward, to facilitate additional sessions. Maybe if you'd like to have a deeper dive into a specific performance area, or maybe have contact with a GSSI recognized scheme owner like Bim, so they can share their learnings as from that scheme owner perspective. So I'll leave a link in the chat box with the report overview. So these can all be found on our website. Yeah, with that, I've come to the official end of my presentation. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I look forward to hearing from you and speaking to you again tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, Eva. We do have a link in the chat, so we could see more information from that website. Yeah, means that we also will keep communicate with Eva and the team related to the questions or things that we need to have more understanding. Do you mind if we open for the question and answer, Eva? Yeah, we do have a questions here in the chat from Ibu Diana. The first question is, how long is the validity of the GSSI recognition and any surveillance conducted during this period? The second questions, during the pre-assessment, should we match to fit to 100% pass of all the requirement? And what if some requirement cannot be implemented as we are in tropical country? What should we do? That's the first 2 questions. There are some others. Thank you. Please, Eva.
Great. On the latter question, so on the pre-assessment, the objective there is really to identify any gaps. So no, there is absolutely no need to, at the end of this process, show that you're in alignment with all of the components. While during a benchmarking process, if there's not alignment, we'll continue to see if there's additional information, come to that conclusion it's in alignment. Or otherwise we'd have to end the process. A pre-assessment, we will definitely be able to finalize this process, and at the end of this process, give you a full list of where everything's in alignment and where there is still information or documentation missing. The only thing we do recommend with the pre-assessment is that some of the core requirements, such as the third-party system, are already in place, because a pre-assessment is most useful if you are not fully in alignment yet, but for the large part are already operating the type of scheme that fits the framework. Sorry, could you remind me what the first question was?
The first is, how long is the validity of GSSI?
Yeah, Good question. That is, in principle, 3 years from the date of recognition, and that includes one monitoring of continued alignment, so one MOCA review, which will take place about a year to a year and a half after initial recognition, so kind of halfway through that recognition cycle. So what we see with the schemes that are currently aligned is that they obtained that recognition in the past 3 to 4 years, and most of them have by now already completed a MOCA. Some of them still have to, and by the time that we launch the version 2 of our tool, which will be this summer, they will all be re-benchmarked again, and then we'll continue that cycle of them having recognition for 3 years and then being evaluated sometime halfway through that period.
Okay, thank you. Is there any penalty or sanction during this period, as if there is an issue? Like we have a problem like in the food safety issue or environmental issue, and then is there any things will be defined?
So we will we monitor the schemes only at the time of the recognition and of the MOCA in principle, but it could be that in case of extreme circumstances, there is a operating of the scheme that is definitely not the way it was at the time of benchmarking, but in principle, we are confident that, you know, with our benchmarking process, with our framework, that we can benchmark schemes in a way that we can be certain that by the time that we recognize them, that they have all the procedures in place and that they operate in a way that things like that shouldn't occur, or if, of course, something can occur, that the schemes handle these situations adequately.
Understood. Ibu Diana, tadi sudah disampaikan bahwa masa validasi expirednya 3 tahun, akan ada surveillance diantaranya, artinya antara 1 sampai 1,5 tahun. Terus juga pre-assessment itu sebetulnya masih di awal, tapi kalau udah kita bisa pas pre-assessment-nya, maka pada saat assessment-nya itu akan lebih mudah lagi. Nah, mungkin yang belum kita tanyakan tadi adalah metodenya ya, metode apakah mereka perlu visit, sampai sejauh mana mereka akan melakukan visit. Okay, any other questions from the floors?
Bu Novia.
Silakan Pak Sudari.
I thank for a very good presentation. Yeah, just one question. Just the eco level or eco level that you already certified or benchmark and then approved, and they putting also in the label, yeah, in the product level they put like say for example ASC, or they certified by Gssi, or they can put something like that in the label, or is it just a matter of the visibility? I mean, how consumer can understand that is already certified by the GSSI?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I think this relates very much again to what I mentioned earlier about GSSI being more of a business-to-business organization. So we're not a consumer-facing organization going to inform or incentivize the consumers to only buy certified products that are certified by GSSI recognized schemes. GSSI recognized schemes, they do not include our logo on their logo, because we really wish that the focus will continue on their program, and that will be what's promoted to the consumer. And the work we do is really more behind the scenes. So in a way, you could almost say a consumer doesn't always have to be aware of what is and what is GSSI recognized, because we work with retailers, making sure that they source from the GSSI recognized schemes. So as much as possible that the sustainable products that are available are from that pool of GSSI recognized schemes. There are some situations in which the GSSI logo can be used. but to avoid confusion as much as possible with the eco labels itself, because our logo, it's not an eco label. We have some guidelines set on that for the scheme owners, but also our partners. So we manage that responsibly.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the floors? We still have 30 minutes, 25 minutes. Or anyone would like to add or brings the experience during the benchmarking in 2015?
Ibu Novia, may I?
Yes, please, Bu Debbie.
Thank you, Eva. I repeated Ibu Novia's question actually. Ibu Novia asked about the visit, whether that you have to go to the field for the farm, or to go to the CB, or as witness the auditors working, or what is it? Go to the BSN, Badan Standarisasi Nasional, or accreditation, or some other places, or just in one room and then you conduct the document evaluation. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for your question. So if I understand correctly, that relates to our office visit that we conduct as part of the benchmark process.
The office
2015 itu
oh yeah 2015 it was like a meeting scheduled for 1 week, like couple days, but after the second or third day I couldn't recall, we found that GSSI only could assess for the standard, not for the procedural requirements. That's why the benchmarking process was stopped at that time. So we didn't continue. But for this time, maybe we are more prepared because the certification scheme is now based on ISO. So it would be better, I think.
Yeah, so for during the pre-assessment, the independent experts, they'd really be looking at your procedures, at your standards. But then when we're moving on to a benchmark process, it will be not just a procedural review, but also really looking at the evidence of implementation. So audit reports, but also there will be an office visit of the independent expert coming to the IndoGAP office to verify some documentation that is just more difficult to assess in an offline manner.
Okay, so maybe for get a better picture of what the schedule of the benchmark would be, maybe we already present you the involved parties. So which parties would you like to visit, or should we just bring all the documents into one place and then we conduct our benchmarking in the same place? We would like to have those kinds of information in advance. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's very understandable. That information would be provided by an independent expert because they are best suited to understand which type of documentation requires some more closer review, and also which organization would really be the right organization to go to for reviewing that information. Us as the Secretariat, we're really coordinating the process. But this relates more, I expect, to an in-depth review of your management systems, of the organizations you work with. And then we leave that up to our independent experts to take that up and interpret how the benchmark framework applies there to your organization.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just silly question. During this pandemic, what is your recommendation? I mean, as if we could, we plan to prepare all the assessment and all the completed information. And we may say that by end of this year, the condition during the pandemics, we may not have a big change. Whether we need to delay it or the virtual virtual evaluation will be conducted. How is your recommendation?
Yeah, that's thanks for that question. I think off the top of my head now, what I definitely wouldn't recommend is to postpone the work. I think it's good to start picking up this work because working towards a pre-assessment and working towards that takes time. Reviewing the framework for yourself, gathering all the documentation, that takes time. And then following the pre-assessment, what we've learned with previous assessment is that there will usually be gaps that are still identified, and maybe there's procedures that are still missing, or maybe there's improvement needed in the way that your CB conducts an audit, just to give 2 examples. And correcting this or implementing new procedures, it takes time. So it can definitely, I don't think it's premature at all to start looking at it now, to start working towards that pre-assessment. In case everything goes really well and there is actually, because of the work you have already done, there is actually not that much more left to do after a pre-assessment. And you're almost ready to go to the benchmark application stage. Of course, we don't know how long this current situation is going to continue in this manner, but it is definitely possible to already start a benchmark application now. We have had a benchmark application start in the middle of the pandemic. We have the procedures, all of them are available. Either we can do it online or, for instance, the office visit, which used to be always in person. We also have a remote procedure in case of extraordinary circumstances for that available. And same with the auditing. We require on-site visits, but we also do have a remote auditing procedure in place now. So so I definitely recommend to start now, and also to keep us in the loop with that and make sure that we do assist you wherever we can. And definitely no need to postpone, because A, it takes a lot of time, but B, even if we start in a pandemic, that is definitely a possibility as well.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you very much. So we have to continue the application, preparing the application. And tomorrow morning, we plan to have a small meeting. And then we would like to absorb and then convert all the understanding from this afternoon session. Tomorrow, we would plan to discuss and try to develop the action plan, what to do. And then in the afternoon, if you don't mind, we will have you back, and then we will discuss whether it is still, we could continue the process as we expect. Any other questions or response from the floor, please? We still have a time, about 20 minutes. Adakah yang semua siap untuk maju melanjutkan aplikasi ke benchmarking, atau ada yang masih ragu-ragu atau mau tanyanya besok saja? Apa yang akan kita lakukan? Bahasa Indonesia nggak apa-apa, nanti saya terjemahkan, saya coba terjemahkan dan bantuan yang lain.
Bu Novia.
Yes, please Pak.
Bu Novia, saya kira ini internal kita. Coba tadi kan yang banyak disebut-sebut oleh Mbak Eva itu kan contohnya itu BAP standar ya. Terus Aquaculture Practices standar. Coba kita lihat standar dia seperti apa gitu. Ya. saya bicara komponen C-nya dulu ya, komponen C-nya dulu. Ya. Jadi BAP standar tadi kan, ya, seperti apa standarnya sehingga dia boleh dibilang dijadiin contoh oleh Eva. Karena setahu saya BAP itu khusus untuk aquaculture. Kalau yang lain itu macam-macam gitu ya, agriculture secara umum dan penangkapan. Itu aja mungkin barangkali Bu Debi ya. Karena tadi ya banyak yang dicontohkan adalah BAP standar gitu.
Ya Pak. Jadi so we are discussing about the standard setting Eva internally. So Pak Sukenda, terima kasih banyak. Thank you for remind us. Actually, during our standard setting process, we tried to explain about the FAO minimum requirements for each components or parameters. But you know that the national Indonesian national standard setting is shall be consensus. So it's not all parties agreed on that particular matter, and we have to like revise or adjust the statements. That is why maybe we have to consider about the consideration, you know, for everything, because that is why Eva actually we need the references that the GSSI used when you were developing the assessment tools for each components in order to make us understand about each component's background, and also in order to confident the technical commissions of the standardization setting process for them to agree or to approve the revision of the standards. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that is absolutely, it's a very important topic you bring up of the references the components are based on. It's publicly available, so the PDF we have of the tool with all the components, it does have those references included. It's mainly FAO Code of Conduct and Guidelines, but there's also other international references included there, like ISO, for instance. So they're available in that PDF, and I also can provide you with an updated Excel if you find that easier to work with. Again, showing each component, the component text, the guidance, but then also those references that the component is based on. So it should be easy to also go back to those original sources if you wish to do so.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Saya mau nanya lagi tapi malu, ini kebanyakan.
Ibu Novia, maybe just one quick feedback on what Eva mentioned as a possibility, and that is learning from the experience of BIM. I think that would be very interesting for IndoGAP and very informing, and I would like to ask Eva to see whether GSSI would be able to facilitate that contact between BIM and IndoGAP. I think there would be very important lessons from their point of view that we can take into consideration for IndoGAP. Thanks.
Great. That's
Yes, just to quickly respond to that, that is definitely a possibility. I expect they will be happy to share their learnings with you, and of course we'll be happy to facilitate that, and really glad also to contribute to the learning sharing between the scheme owners, because I definitely think that, you know, them as scheme owners, but also you know, looking at the reports and the learning of the recognized schemes, I think it's such a valuable source of information that is available now to IndoGAP that wasn't yet in 2015. So yes, please do let me know, and I will be happy to set that up at any time with them.
okay. Yes. Thank you, Eva, for the support. Anything else? Okay, as if we don't have more questions or comments, we could finalize this session. Seems that actually in the chat room we have so many discussion related to the preparation for tomorrow. So hopefully we may have a time to recap what we have today, since in the morning session to the afternoon session, and then tomorrow morning we'll be back preparing a small discussion, developing the action plan, and then in the afternoon we may have a short time to present it what we have in the morning to you, and then we will discuss whether it will fit to the agenda for the application and all the preparation for the benchmarking process. Okay,
Sounds
so
great.
everybody.
I will provide the documentation with the references later today, so you'll have it for tomorrow in case you'd already like to have a look at that. And I look forward to hearing from you tomorrow and seeing you again.
Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much. Terima kasih Bapak dan Ibu. So I finalized this afternoon session of the first day. We get so many information, data, and curiosity that we need to make another steps forward to the benchmarking process for the fish and fishery product for Indonesia. Thank you very much, and stay fit, stay happy, and then we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. Yeah, see you tomorrow then. Yeah.
Terima kasih.
Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Thanks, Nima.
Thank you, Sudari. Thank you, Novia. Thank you, Budevi.
Terima kasih, Nima. Thank you, Nima.
Thank you, Professor Sukenda. Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. Thank you.
Tomorrow you will be back, right?
Yes.
Okay. Terima kasih, Pak.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Sampai ketemu. Besok jam 9.30 ya, Bu Novia.
Oh, 9.30.
Besok pagi ada diskusi. Oh ya, buat bapak-bapak. Kami akan lakukan diskusi. Rencananya akan dipimpin leading by DJPB. Jadi kami minta kesediaan Ibu Debi dan Pak Nana untuk membantu memfasilitasi rencana kerja kita, apa yang akan kita lakukan. Ya, mungkin sekitar 1 sampai 1,5 jam. Tadi disepakati oleh event organizer 9.30. 9.30 ini akan kita lagi. Lalu kita akan istirahat jam 12 siang, dan setelah itu jam 1.30 kita akan kembali mengundang Eva. Nanti masing-masing kelompok, entah itu satu kelompok atau 2 kelompok, besok kita pastikan mempresentasikan rencana action plan kita seperti apa, dan diskusi mengenai informasi-informasi lain yang perlu dikumpulkan. Ada masukan dengan rencana besok? Jadi insya Allah saya akan bersama dengan Mbak Ita akan mampir di lantai 7 ya. Kita physically kita coba untuk memfasilitasi. Kalau ternyata cuma beberapa orang yang semua ada di ruangan, let's do it. Tapi tetap kita akan tayang di Zoom untuk bisa dipantau dan mengundang masukan dari yang lain. Oke? So far so good. Tetap semangat, tetap sehat. Sampai besok jam 9.30.
Semangat terus.
Semangat terus. Terima kasih Pak Sabto.